Fortunately now it's more or less over, but of course during the 90s especially there were various projects in a way were trying to propose peace, and of course there was an abuse of this word. And now, especially for people that live here, of course they understand this word in a very cynical way, and people that use it in a way it's always not really seen in a kind of clean way. There is always seems kind of double agenda of why people are using this word, and I think it's now maybe people maybe would like to see things that are not necessarily flat in this idea of very symmetrical way of representing the conflict. So there were thousands of projects where you have 5 Palestinians, 5 Israelis, this kind of symmetries. In a context where actually it's completely asymmetric, so it doesn't have any sense to reproduce a symmetry in projects where actually in reality there is a very strong asymmetry, where there is a power, where there is a population that has a power with its government and army, and then there is another population that is under occupation. So it doesn't have any sense to have a kind of symmetrical approach to the question. But fortunately, I think maybe recently more and more people are realizing that it might be more, let's say, interesting actually to recognize that there is a kind of antagonism, and this should be recognized. For example, for the Istanbul Biennale, we did a project for the last Istanbul Biennale which the title was actually How to Re-inhabit the House of Your Enemy. And as a question, we thought that was much more interesting than just creating space for peace or things like this. The work was shown in an abandoned Greek school. So the setting, it was like an abandoned school with benches and blackboards. So one of the ideas it was just to produce 5 books that at that time were placed on the benches. So it is like books for the students. And then there was this question on the blackboard. So when you were experiencing the space, you were just entering the space, and of course we kept the room as it was, without painting, without transforming this in an art space. So you was entering, and then you had this question, how to inhabit the house of your enemy. And then you have these 5 books that actually were 5 books that were part of our fragments of our projects, let's say. And then people were, able to sit down there and to study, basically. And maybe what we hope that also you keep this question, and when you come back home, you will see how this question maybe is relevant for Palestine, but also is relevant for many also different other places. And this is, I think, is related to your question about peace, because we found sometimes more interesting where it's, in a way, we try to maybe to construct this kind of clear antagonism, because this is what exists and what is given in a way, instead of trying to maybe to use kind of more problematic way of how to put people together, under one word of peace. And this, I think, is also something that has changed recently. Maybe there is something that already, for example, happened here, especially in Bet Sahur, during the first Intifada. It was actually where people burned their own IDs, because we were refusing the Israeli authorities. And I think if this act would be maybe something that could be imagined globally, I think would be something that, for example, burning passports and IDs, I think this will imply completely rethinking the geography of the entire world. So I think locally this, in a way, was produced here in Bet Sahur, but I think it would be maybe a radical gesture that could contaminate different places. And I think this will imply also reimagining the idea of state, nation, and border. During the first Intifada, especially the community here, was called the White Intifada, because it was non-violent Intifada. In fact, it's also, sometimes it's depressing, because you have a lot of international media and scholars that are calling for Palestinians for non-violent resistance, but they don't know that they tried. I mean, there was non-violence resistance, the first Intifada, and it didn't work. So, and they come here with the idea of to teach something to Palestinians, but this is actually what they did already. So they know how to do it. You know, they tried any form of resistance. And specifically, this one was based on, for example, refusing to pay taxes to Israelis at the time, and refusing to, in this case, also to use the IDs, Israeli IDs. So I think there was kind of ways of contesting the Israeli authority here in a very kind of radical ways, and it was not just a radical act of few people, but it was an entire community. In fact, most of the family in Beit Sahur had like 1 or 2 persons were in prison because of these acts, and it was completely non-violent, and in a way they produce also something important, but unfortunately then after this is all the political history about Palestine. After the Second Intifada, it started actually the so-called peace process that actually destroyed all what was produced positively in the First Intifada. So most of the people actually look now at the peace process as really, really problematic moment in the Palestinian struggle.